Hello everybody and welcome to Grimdork Minis. My name is Ethan. Wanted to kick off the channel today with a tutorial of how to do a knob painted in the Goff clan scheme for the Orks. A little bit about what I want to do with the channel is create beginner-friendly tutorials that will give you great results in not a lot of time. This whole paint job, in order to create this knob, took about 2.5 hours. So to start off with, we are just going to use a orc flesh from GW, just your standard nice and easy green base coat over the top. Next we're going to do a Moody Mauve Speed Paint 2.0. Trick with this is you're going to want to water it down about 3:1 with Speed Paint Medium, and what we really want to do is just target the deepest recesses as well as kind of hit the undersides of these muscles as we get through. Biggest thing, just target your deepest recesses. Just do nice light wash. You can always go back and add more as it dries. It's going to look a little bit more intense, right when it first goes on versus after it's got a minute to dry. And biggest thing, make sure you water it down 3:1 with that speed paint medium. It'll allow it to really flow in the recesses and just give things just a nice kind of tint. Just dull down the green a little bit, give it a nice, more realistic looking undertone. One of my favorite things about doing Goff Orks is the fact that it allows you to give in a more vibrant green skin tone. Really makes you think about this is what an orc should look like. You've got the dark armor, which contrasts extraordinarily well with the kind of bright, vibrant green that we're going for here on the skin tone. It makes a really clear pop on the tabletop. Really makes an army that's going to stand out for you. Now, as you can see, we have a nice purple undertone to our green flesh. Nice deep purple in those recesses, really gives a lot of definition to the muscles, and once again, just gives it that more kind of realistic tone. Now that we have our underneath shading done, we're going to start up with the first level of highlight, which is going to be a 50-50 mix of orc flesh and ochre camo. One, just water it down just a little bit, just so that it's not coming in full force onto our paint job. Mix probably about 2 units of that kind of orc flesh mix to about 1 unit of water, and really just wanted to highlight, I would say, probably about the top 3/4 of each muscle. Really give a lot of definition onto there. Just start to cover up that undertone that we've got going on. Now we're going to use ochre camo, thinned down about 2:1 with water, and targeting about the top 50% of each muscle group. Just trying to really emphasize where the light's hitting, slowly get brighter and brighter as we go up, and just targeting less and less of each muscle as we kind of take a pass. And once again, we are going to take another step up in brightness with Screaming Skull. We're going to mix this about 50-50 with our previous Ogre and Camo, just to get a more smooth blend without having to go through all the problems and trouble of glazing. Glazing is going to be where you basically water your paints down pretty extreme amount just to get a very slight variation and change in color. Once again, with this being more of a beginner tutorial, the idea is just very subtle steps up in terms of brightness, covering slightly less and less areas will give you a quick result, a easy result, and a very good looking result all in one go. Things to remember when we are doing orcs. When we field them on the tabletop, there are going to be a whole bunch of them. Biggest thing is we don't want an army to take us 3, 4, 5 hours a model for the most part. If we do that, we're never going to get through and actually get to be able to play a game on the tabletop. Our Ork Skin is looking great up to this point. We're going to move on to our final highlight, which is going to be Screaming Skull, once again mixed about 2-to-1 with water, just to get a nice little subtle blend in without doing a bunch of work. For this, we're just going to target the highest parts of the muscles. I would say probably about the top 10%, even maybe less than that, just kind of doing a subtle kind of dot highlight in some places, just tapping and dragging very sharp points on our skin, on our face, on the ears, just the top little bits of the muscles, and just some little veins and that sort of thing. With this step done, that is going to mark our skin complete. I think it looks great. All in all, really quick job. Looks fantastic when it's on a group of a bunch of different orcs. With that completed, we are moving on to our Goff Armor. The main color is going to be black, along with some kind of white accents and that sort of thing. For the main of the armor, instead of just starting out with a straight black, I like to do blue-black by Pro Acryl. It gives a nice midpoint that's really more interesting to look at than just kind of blacks mixed in with grays and that sort of thing. So to do this, we're going to go ahead and base coat all the areas where we want blacks. It's going to be our shoulder pads, it's going to be the top of the boss pole, as well as kind of the pistol accents, and a little bit of armor on his chest. Now we're going to begin to introduce our actual black with a Baden black from Citadel, using a dry brush into the areas of the shoulder pads and the armor where the light is not going to strike as much. In general, we're not going to pay too much attention to it, but we want to mostly hit the lower half of each piece of armor. Just going to do a little bit of light stippling with this, and then a little dragging and marking with it, just to introduce a little bit of texture for this as we go. Great so far. We're going to go ahead and introduce a Nuln Oil light wash, more of a glaze than anything. So we're going to take it out of our pot, we're going to put it onto our wet palette, just kind of water it down just a little bit, get some of the excess off before we start to kind of use this to blend in from our blue-black to our black. Use this just to get a little bit more smooth of a transition between the different colors. Looks a little bit more natural, looks a little bit more right. Beginning our highlights. For the first layer, we're going to do Fenrisian Gray, once again sticking away from kind of just like the standard gray spectrum, introducing a little bit of blue to our palette. We're going to mix this with the blue-black and use this as our first highlight. Wanting to target about the top 30-35% of the models. Wherever light is going to be impacting most, catch your edges, that sort of thing. Just give it a little bit more contrast going. Here's where this armor really starts to shine. We're going to take some Fenrisian Gray, and this time we're going to use this straight up. We're not going to try to mix much water into it at all, just right into our wet palette, just to get it to flow a little bit better. You're going to take a little bit of sponge. I can get this from a craft store, that sort of thing. And we're going to use this similar to a dry brush, except we're just going to kind of gently dab it onto the top bits of the armor, as well as just kind of all around it. This is going to introduce a lot of texture. Our Goff Orks, they like to get into melee, they like to be up close, their armor's going to get dinged up. And this introduces almost like little fine scratches that really look like these guys have been in combat and their armor is ruined. Just introduces a lot of nice texture, a little bit of realism. And now we move to the part of the paint job of the parts that people will not notice as much. That's going to be our shirts, our belts, our pants, little miscellaneous bits. Biggest thing to remember here, people are not going to be looking at these and judging them as tightly and as closely as they will with our armor and our skin tone. We really wanted those two bits to stand out, so we can take a little bit of a breather on this back half of the paint job. So we're going to use a gray sear mix for our pants here. Just go ahead and color it in, base coat nice. We're going to go back and shade later. For our leather details, we're going to use Rhinox hide. Just make sure to get in all of those areas. That's going to be your belts, patches, little wrist guards, that sort of thing. For all of our bone details as well as wraps, we are going to use Morghast bone. For orcs, that's going to be teeth, skulls, and kind of like that little weapon wrap. Moving on to another large section of the model, we're going to use dark silver from Procryl for all of our metallic base coats. That's going to be anywhere pretty much at this point that's not filled in. It's going to be your boots, little bits of armor, your gun, and whatever weapon you tend to be using at the time, as well as the boss pole. In order to break up our current metallics, we're going to switch over to copper, once again from Procryl. In general, I tend to prefer the metallics from Procryl. They just flow a little bit better, go on a little smoother. For our other kind of secondary color for our Goffs, that's going to be red. So for this, we're going to use Mephiston red and just pick out a little bit of accents on his weapon here in order for that to come into play. And here we are, base coat's done before we move into our wash, which will be Nuln Oil. For this, we're going to mostly cover the majority of the model here. Try to focus away from the most raised edges, because if not, you're just going to have to go right back and highlight them. The goal of this step is just to take care of the easy bits. Once again, nobody's paying attention to the shirt and the pants. People are caring about your armor and your skin tone, the ones that we really spend a lot of time working on. So just go ahead and do a nice light wash, get in the recesses, make sure to cover all your bits. Now for our belts and leather as well as the wrap, we're going to use Reikland Flesh Shade. Once again, just a light wash, introduce a little bit of extra color, a little bit of differentiation from the rest of the body of the model that we just did. Now that our shading is done, we are going to jump back over to Gray Sear, and we're going to use this to base coat the little bits of the armor that are supposedly white, as well as just bring our highlight back up to our pants to a location that we're happy with. Just give it a little pop of color. It doesn't need to be much. Just target your raised edges. It's going to be kind of like right on his butt, on his knees, that sort of thing, as well as like the folds in his shirt. And we're going to start on a light checkerboard pattern for his shoulder pad. Apologies for the camera angle, kind of messed that up a little bit, still trying to figure that step out. Biggest thing with doing that is water your paints down, I would say about 50-50, just to the point where it's coming off the brush nice and cleanly. I typically do about one stripe each. Make sure you mark out your different little checkers on there with a very thin line of paint, and then from there just kind of start building it out, do squares. With Ork freehanding, checkers, anything else, I typically like to do a little bit of Nuln Oil over the top of it, especially on Goff Orks, just to kind of blend it in just a little bit into the armor, make it look a little bit more dingy. And we're going to move over to Evil Sun Scarlet for the highlight on our red details, just a little bit on the tips, just make them pop. Once again, just another pop of color for these mostly black orcs, anything we can do to help out. Big step here for the weathering, get our silver from Pro Krill. You want to find a really beat up brush you have. In this case, I just have an old synthetic brush. The little tip is really starting to flare out, and we're going to treat this similar to a dry brush. We're just getting a little bit on the tips. We're going to wipe a lot of the excess off on a paper towel, and then just gently drag it along the corners of the model. This is going to deposit just a little bit of the silver paint, but also the biggest thing is it catches on those little bristles and does just like a nice little streak, makes it look nice and weathered, like something is beat up, something's dragged along it, and give it a nice gouge. And for the second part of our weathering, we are going to take Scrag Brown, mix that pretty heavily with water, I would say about 6:1, just to get a light glaze, and this is going to create our rust effect. You want to target, I would say, mostly the recesses, little areas that it can flow into, as well as scratches where we left our silver, where rust and water would get stuck, and just kind of dry it up. We've got orcs, they're going to be dirty and messy, they don't believe in clean armor. For our leather details, we're just going to do a very, very small Doombull Brown edge highlight. Just target the top halves of each of the little bits, just to give it a little bit more distinction. And from there, we are going to paint our eyes. A little bit terrifying for a lot of people. Biggest thing is, get your size 1 brush, whatever has a really fine tip. If it's small in a size 1, great. And just go ahead and put a little bit on your brush, get a little bit watered down, and just touch right to it. We're going to use Evil Sun Scarlet for our good intact eye, and then a Pallid Witch Flesh for this eye that's been a little bit destroyed, that has the scar going through it. Just gives it a little bit of a dead look to it. Easy to work with. It just takes about 45 to an hour to dry. We're going to do Doombull Brown. We're going for kind of this like rocky desert base, so just pick out a couple little bits of the cork that are nice and exposed still, put a little bit of that out. And we're going to do a dry brush of Screaming Skull over the dried ground now, just to give it a little bit more texture. Before we move on to our pigment powders, which we use Vallejo, this dark yellow ochre, and target kind of just over the sandy bits. Just get a little bit in your brush and just spread it around. It'll fall right into the cracks. It looks great. For the brown, I'm going to use this dark brown, once again, pigment from Vallejo, hit the rocks, and that's going to take us up to the last little bit where we are going to paint the base rim black. Just go ahead and pick whatever dollar store bottle of stuff up you can. It's a black base rim. They're all going to look the same. And there we have it. There's our Goff knob in all of its glory. Looks fantastic. Once again, really big things we wanted to target here were the green skin and the black armor, giving it a quick, realistic look. I think he looks fantastic. Thank you all for watching. If you guys would not mind, please leave a comment with projects you'd like to see in the future. The next thing I'm planning to do is a Bad Moons knob in a similar style, beginner friendly, and we're going to go from there. So thank you all so much for watching. Catch you later.